Monday. It is part 7 of Mandala Unplugged, where we're going to work the details to finish out our corners. In these last few videos, rather than showing a slideshow of our little bits of progress, what I want to do now is save the wow moment until the very end. So I want to be able to show where we went from a circle into a square, where we turned our mandala into a quilt block. So what I'm going to do is create a page called Mandala Unplugged on myhrequilts.com. So as soon as you finish your mandala, send in that final picture and I'll add it to the online show. And it'll start in March, but it'll go through the rest of 2018. So you can finish it anytime this year and I'll pop it on there. And it should be pretty spectacular to see how one idea, one little drawing turned into so many different art pieces expressing everybody's individuality. So I can't wait for that, and I can't wait to see how many mandalas we get. So please send your pictures in. So today we're going to be working single Oya motifs and crocheted fairy wings, and we're going to be doing some embroidery. So here's what you'll need for today. Okay, so to work the Oya, you can use your original thread that you had used previously or try something different, totally up to you. The beads, and so we're going to do 4 sets, 4 motifs. So you're going to want 16 H beads and 7 times 4, 28 G beads, or whatever beads you decide. These are, again, size 8. Seed beads, the crochet hook that you used to make your Oya originally, so that it's the same size. We're going to use another crochet hook, 1.75 millimeter, and that is a steel hook. It's a little bit bigger, you can see. We are going to be using it with yarn C to make the fairy wings, and yarn C really isn't a yarn at all. It's a size 5 pearl cotton, but I put a lot of that in the kit just because we needed so much to crochet with. But any sort of lace or sock weight yarn will do fine. Size 5. If you want your fairy wings bigger, you could even do a 3. Again, it's all going to depend on the size hook that you use and the way that you crochet, whether you loose or tight. We're going to do a little bit more ribbon work, so we've got ribbon B, and then sparkly thread, and your embroidery floss E and F. And, you know, just always have a few other threads lying around just in case, you know, you decide you want to do something different with color or even put more in than we're talking about here. Okay, but we'll do the embroidery last. We're going to start with the Oya first. To make a single Oya motif is really fun. These actually can be really useful as far as flower petals. They look like kind of like dragon scales. I mean, they're really neat just on their own. So what you're going to do is same thing. You can string these on one at a time, one motif at a time, or now just alternate, you know, your 7 fan beads and your 4 base beads. You could just put 4 of those on there, and then we'll make the motifs separately. So starting with a slip knot as always, chain 1 just to tighten that little knot up. And then just slide those 4 beads up. Like we did before. And then work a chain 1 to lock them in place. And now we're already at the top of that little quad that we have. So to start the fan, we're going to go 1, 2, 3 chains. Pull all 7 beads up so that they're available and ready to go. And then remember, we're just doing pull up a bead. Oh, that little tail. Try to keep him out of the way. Pull up a bead, do a double crochet back into the top. So what you have here is this knot, right, and this tail. Leave your tail to the right, and we're going to deal with that later. So just working at the top of the quad of those little foursome beads that you started with, your base beads. Work a double crochet, bead 1, chain 1, double crochet, bead one, chain one, double crochet, and then just keep working that until your very last bead, and I'll show you what to do on that 7th one. Okay, so on the 7th one, the only difference is you're going to pull it up and chain one as always, and then just chain 2 more, 1, 2, and then slip stitch down back into the base just to tighten that up and end where we don't have any sort of loops. Pull that up, clip it, and then I like to just grab that little end and pull it through the loop and pull tight. Okay, so then when you're done with that, you might just have to manipulate it a little bit just to get yourself back into that quad. And then to solidify the shape, just take a needle, and this is why we wanted to leave that one strand over to the right, because on this side, go down through the 2 beads, thread your needle on the other side, and then what I like to do is just tie a knot right at the base. And then there you have your single fan Oya, single motif Oya, and then you can use these to sew it onto the piece, which we'll do next. Okay, so this little guy goes right between the corner leaf and your rickrack adorned applique. And I like it because it kind of looks like this is sort of continuing on in the background. But you know, this is a great place too for a really beautiful button. So let's say you have 4 buttons that maybe are antique or that are special to you. You could use those here. A big sequence in a bead would be really beautiful. So all you need is 4 of the same thing if you're, you know, going with symmetry, which we really kind of are in this mandala, and then just sew them on. So to sew these guys, it's just really a matter of threading one of these tails and looping over the base of this, the base of your quad beads here, and then just stitching a few places in between the beads just to hold the top down and flat in place. So maybe I'll go on this side, and I'm not working through the back, of course, just through the top and the batting as always. And that should do it. Now I'm bringing it all the way to the back, and then if I wanted to, you know, maybe I want this to lay really flat, so I'll take this other tail. You've got to weave it in anyway, so you might as well stitch down some of the things. So let's go ahead and stitch the end beads down, and then just weave them in the back. So go ahead and make 4 of those, or 4 of whatever it is that you want to put in that little space between here, and then come back and we're going to work on some crocheted fairy wings. So just a heads up, here's what it looks like. You know, we're going to have one wing headed this way, the other one headed this way, just to mimic that arc and give the piece some repetition. If you're not crocheting, of course, anything goes here. You could put wool applique, you know, make some embroidery on here to give your piece some more texture. You could do a blanket stitch some more, or a bullion stitch, or whatever you want to do. Again, you have buttons here, but this is these crochet fairy wings, even though they're a little tricky on the reverse single crochet, which is also called the crab stitch, it's worth a try. So give it a shot, and that's what we're going to work on next. Alrighty, so always start with the slip knot. And to do the left curving one, we're going to chain 8. Make sure your slip knot is loose. 1, 2, 8. The 3rd chain from the hook, we're going to do 1 single crochet. So not this one, but this one. And remember, we're just going into the bottom. So we have the 2 threads on the top. 1 single crochet. In the next stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets. So that is an increase, and that will give us our little arc. And in the next stitch, we're doing 1/2 double crochet. So that's right here, just one. And in the next stitch, we're doing 2 half double crochets. And at this point, just check to make sure that you still have 2 chains that you can work into. They get a little hidden when you start cramming stitches in, but I've got this one and that one, so I'm good to go. 1 double crochet into the next chain. And then 2 double crochets in the last chain. Very basic, pretty easy crochet. Now working that detailed texture on the way back, here's where it gets kind of real. You're going to be doing what's called a crab stitch or a reverse single crochet, and the angling on this is a little tricky, so just sort of follow along with me and I'll talk you through it. Let's just chain 1 to start, and we're going to be just working in the fronts of the stitches. So that leaves the back of the stitches available to work into if we wanted to. We're not doing that in this case, but to do a traditional fairy wing, this is how it's done. So we're going to just stay with it. So I want to work single crochet going from left to right, which is a little tricky because the threads are not lying the way that you want them to be. So almost like writing a letter C, you're going to angle your hook and down into just the front of your stitch. And now normally with crochet, we would go under, but here we're just going to grab it, pull it through that stitch, and again, it's a swooping motion, so that what ends up on your hook is your original stitch, and that one that you grabbed is going to be on the left side. This, of course, is if you're right-handed. If you're a left-handed crocheter, make sure you're reversing all of these instructions. Okay, so there's one. So now, again, I'm writing the letter C, and I'm going into just the front of the next stitch. And then what I want to do is make sure that the yarn is lying over the top. Grab it from the top and swirl it around so that my original stitch is on the right hand side and the one I just grabbed is on the left hand side. This definitely takes some practice. I've been teaching this for a little while, and it's not, nobody gets it right away. But it's worth knowing because it really does create such a beautiful little rolled texture at the top. Again, so the letter C, right? All the way, keeping that stitch on, going just through the front of your stitch. Make sure the thread is lying over the top of your roll, and you're just grabbing it and then twisting it around again so that the yarn that you brought up is on the left hand side. Okay, I'll do one more. So into the front, grab the yarn and twist it. See how the threads on there are kind of twisted. This is this, and this on the right was the stitch I already had on there. So it takes a little bit of patience, a little bit of practice, but boy, it is worth it. It is so pretty. Okay, so then just do that all the way to the end, and you'll end up with 9 reverse single crochets. And then there's that roll on the top, which is really pretty. After the 9th one, you can go ahead and slip stitch down at the very base of it just to kind of make that pointy at the end. And of course, logistically, there we go. Just work a little slip stitch, cut it, and then use your tails to stitch that onto the background. So let's make the reverse of that. It's the same thing, only this time we're going to start with our double crochets and work back to our single. And in that case, we're going to start with chaining 9 instead of 8. And the reason why is because we need that extra height for our double crochet. So in this case, what we're going to do is do a double crochet in the 4th chain, not the 3rd. So 1, 2, 3 right here. 1, 2. And because we ended with doing 2 double crochets the last time, we're going to start. We're going to start with the increase and then work a single going back around. So in other words, we've done, to start, we're doing 2 double crochets and then just 1 double crochet. And make sure you know where you're going into. That'll tighten up once you get those 2 double crochets in there. And then the next step, going backwards of course, is 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. So that's 2 half doubles all in that same stitch. We're increasing to get our arc there. And then the next stitch we're doing a single half double crochet, 1 half double crochet, which will leave us 2 stitches left. And in the first one we're going to do 2 singles. Here's what will be a little bit different. You know, where normally we would do 1 single, but I'm finding that if I do that, I'm not getting that nice point at the end. So here what I'm going to do instead is just do a slip stitch so I don't get too high at the end there, you know, too tall. So now I'm ready to do the crab stitch or the reverse single crochet back. And on this, remember, we're not turning the work and single crocheting it back on the top. We won't be able to get that roll that way, you know, so we're really having the right side, what we just did, facing us and working back. I didn't say that on the first one, but that's just what we're doing. So chain 1 to start, and in that first stitch, again, you're doing sort of a twist of the wrist to be able to get that roll. Next one, remember we're just working in the fronts of the stitches, so we're coming up in that V, if you can see that. Grab the yarn, twist it, and bring it forward. Coming up in the V, grab the yarn, I should say thread, you can tell I'm a knitter, I call everything yarn. In the front, grab it, and you'll be working 9. So make sure at the end, you know, just cruise your way up. Okay, so this is the last stitch. It's the top of the double crochet. So you can see what it looks like. The top of that double crochet there. That's the last one we're going to do. I'm not going to come down the side. Right, and then clip it and lift up. And just sort of manipulate it so that you can get it looking like a nice little arc there. So as far as where to place the fairy wing, you know, it's, again, I always say pick a place and stay consistent. So what I want to do is maybe just be above this arc here, because we're going to work some embroidery going down here. You know, maybe staying 1/4 of an inch away, and like I always say, just pick away and then stay consistent. When you stitch this on, maybe not go over this roll. We want that to stick up. So when you're stitching it with this thread, maybe just stitch it along here, and then this thread you can stitch the bottom. So I'll show you what I mean. and make sure I'm following the arc of that last fan there. So right now I really don't have to measure or pin it in place because this is my first one, so I don't have anything to really match it to. But from now on I will pin it in place because I am trying to match everything to this one here. So there's no rules yet until you get the first one laid down. And you can see I'm very haphazardly just stitching this on just to get it stitched down in place. It doesn't have to be, you know, you're using the same thread, so you're not going to see any of the threads that you're stitching it down with. I'm just maybe going over one, and now here I'm at the edge. And then I'll just pop that down into the back. And then if this is kind of sticking up at all, you know, just make sure that that comes down into a point because that's really effective. And then just sort of fluff up your roll. There's a lot you can do with that. I can't wait to see what some of you do along here. And then just bring it to the back and weave the back in like you know how to do. All right, so I'll stitch the other one on and then I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, and so once you get them sewn on, they're going to look something like this. So now we can work the embroidery around here and get some fun details in. So let's do that next. Get out your sparkly thread. All right, let's get a little bit more sparkle into this guy. What we're going to do is we're going to work a little stem stitch around this area here and then just pull up a lazy daisy with a bead up here. So I've knotted my sparkly thread. You just need about 12 inches or so. Don't need a lot for this. Start at the top, right, and then just come through. And then when you're working a stem stitch, the needle's actually going to point away from you. It's going to point towards the place that you're coming out of. So always keep your thread on either side. In this case, we're going to go to the outside of this circle. And keep that always on that one side. So that's how you'll get that nice little twist. I like little short stitches, 1/8 of an inch. So to start it, I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch away, insert the needle into the background of the fabric in the background of the quilt, and then come up midway between where you're inserting your needle and where you came out of here. And then make sure your needle is going over the thread that's laying flat, okay? And pull that through. Now I'm working with a Ricky Tim's Razzle Dazzle, which is lovely, but it's like, I don't know, it's like 8 or 10 different threads, so I want to make sure that I'm getting all the threads coming through all at the same time. Okay, so now this is going to give you kind of a braided effect, and again, this is called the stem stitch. So now that I've got it started, I'm going to go about 1/8 of an inch away and just come up right in that same hole, or close to it, really close to it, making sure that the needle's over that thread, and slowly, especially if you're using sparkly thread, slowly pull it through. Again, lay the thread to the outside. Make sure your thread is coming, your needle is coming over your thread. Slowly pull it through. It's such a pretty embroidery stitch. It gives a beautiful braided twist and works really well for the stems of leaves and flowers and such. Almost to that corner. And then in the corner what I do is I'll just pop that right back down into the background. Okay. And then come back up in almost in the same spot. Obviously you don't want to come up through the exact same spot, otherwise you'll pull out the threads. Just smooth this thread out a little bit. If your thread gets kind of funky, here's a little tip for you. Push the needle all the way down and then take the eye of the needle on your finger and then just smooth out the thread. Makes it a little easier. Okay. Again, now because I'm starting, I'm going 1/4 of an inch away and coming up in the middle. Always keeping my thread out of the way into the outside and press down with my thumb. so that I can come up over that thread. Okay, and then just come back down where you started. Knot it in the back, and then just tie a knot in the end. Come up just in the point here. Work a lazy daisy, kind of a long one, maybe going halfway. Pop a bead on there. And then just come down, make sure you're over that lazy daisy loop, and then knot it in the back. That's enough with the sparkly thread. So the next thing we're going to work on are the flosses. So get your E and your F embroidery floss and make sure you separated it so you have 2 strands. Okay, so I'm starting with floss E, which is the lighter one, and I've put a knot in the bottom. I've got 2 strands going. And the first thing I'm going to do is work that same stem stitch from the base of here coming all the way down to here, just so that these don't look like they're kind of floating out into space. You know, you almost want it to look like it's on a stem or something. So I'm going to start my thread at the base, the heavier part of the angel wing. And it's your choice if you want to have the thread going on this side or this side. Obviously, it's just pick away and stay consistent. I'm going to work away from me so that I'll always have the thread sort of above where I'm working. So again, I'm starting 1/4 of an inch away and coming up 1/8 of an inch. Just make sure that lays underneath. And then 1/8 of an inch here. And just follow your little path that you've created by the arc of your fairy wing. So here now your choice is you can sort of mark this. I'm a bit of a rebel without a cause, so my MO, I can't believe I'm admitting this, but I'll just stitch it, and if it doesn't work, then I'll take it out and restitch it rather than mark it. I don't know. That's just the way I do it. But the other thing you could do is just take the back of your needle and just sort of create a little path down. And that's, you know, I can kind of see that. That's probably good enough. All I want to do is make sure that this arc is coming and it's ending right here. So I'll just follow that little needle line I made and use my makeshift hair marker there. Still keeping the thread on the outside, you know, towards the corner. The shorter the stitches, the more successful the stem stitch will be. So I always shoot for about 1/8 of an inch. And then just go on down into this crevice of the leaf and knot it in the back, and then we're going to start it again on that side. Okay, and I might as well establish my line here, just so that it can kind of match. Take the back of my needle. That looks good to me. You know, in my mind, I think, well, nature's not totally perfect, so even if it's a little off, these are little, like, leafy stems coming up, right? So, again, there's so much going on in this piece. I mean, a person could drive themselves crazy trying to get it perfect, perfect. But that is not me. Okay, so, again, I'm putting the thread up above towards the corner, starting my 1/4 inch and coming up right between where I insert the needle and where I started the thread. And that looks pretty good to me. You could even go further. You can make a second line here, you know, whatever it is that you want to do to accentuate This you can take and outline the entire thing if you want to, you know, do some sprays up here, whatever you want. The sky is the limit. So the next thing we want to do is work a blanket stitch, just a random blanket stitch, or just a freeform blanket stitch inside here, just to give some more shape. So, you know, I've just got a knitting needle, or you can use your hair marker or stylus or whatever you have, and draw a little arc from where your tip applique meets your line, and just a gentle arc down to where these two meet here. So that's pretty easy. You can just kind of eye that one up. And then down below, we want to be a little less devil may care, you know, because this is kind of this is a gentle flowing curve, and we can get all kinds of wrong eyeing this one up. So what I did was I just laid my quilter's template plastic on top of my motif, and I just drew out the line that I wanted to draw, and that way I'll be consistent all the way around. And I drew a little arrow so I knew which way was up, and you know, of course, you'll just flip this over and draw on this side. So we can start with that side. Just put this along your template. I went over my rickrack here, but it doesn't really matter. Make sure that this point goes just where this is reaching that leaf, and then just score a line, again with your hair, your knitting needle, whatever you got, whatever's handy. And then same kind of thing on top of your applique, on top of the rickrack. Make sure the point is meeting up with that little stem, and then just draw the line. And then you've got a line to follow. So with F, which is the darker embroidery floss, again 2 strands, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to back stitch all the way until I see that line, until I can work some blanket stitching. So let me turn this guy around and show you what a back stitch looks like. Just come right up at the point, and then just don't interfere with this blanket stitch going this way. You know, you're just working alongside of it, 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, whatever you decide. Come up, and then all the back stitches is you're going to go into the hole that you came out of, skip where the thread is exiting out of, and go that same distance on the other side. And that just makes a nice kind of a darker outline. And allows you to continue with the blanket stitch on this piece. So I'm staying within my background stitching, just working along this edge here. A little bit more definition. And then once I hit this line out here, I'm almost to the point where I can start working some blanket stitching. So in that case, what you want to do, I'll go one more, is your last background stitch, come back, and then rather than bypass it, you're just going to come right back up where that is coming out of. And then from here you can work your blanket stitch, which looks like this. And if you remember from doing this on your applique, you want to keep your needle perpendicular to your line, and you always want to exit out your needle on that line so that the line, the backbone of this buttonhole stitch or blanket stitch, lands on the line that you've scored. And then the big secret to the blanket stitch is just make sure your needle is coming over the stitch that you're using. I'm sorry, over the thread that you're using. And then when you get down towards your applique piece here, you obviously don't want to run blanket stitches on top of this applique, so you're just going to back stitch here until you can start working your blanket stitch again. So of course just following your line, going into where you came out of. And about right here I can start maybe working some blanket stitch. So again, make sure you're in that same hole or you're going to get those little jogs that come out. You can kind of manipulate that. Go in the same hole, come out the same hole. Just keep your thread out of the way. And then you can continue your blanket stitch, making sure you can sort of faintly see my line here, that the backbone of this stitch comes out on that line. All the way down, and then just pop, if you still have thread on your needle, pop it over and then work up the other side, and I'll show you what that looks like when we get down there. Okay, and then down here I don't want my blanket stitch lines to cross over that thread, so I'm just going to back stitch my way right down. It's probably just going to be like 2 or 3 stitches. And I really don't have enough on my thread to cruise over, so I'm just going to knot it on the back and then start my new one on the other side. And you know, really, if you decide, I could really put in a blanket stitch. So you know what, I'm just going to do it a little cheat and just pop that guy down in there just so it kind of looks finished. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'll cheat again. There. Okay, so heading back up, and obviously I want to match the other side what I did, so I'm just going to work some tiny little blanket stitches to start, making sure my needle's exiting on my scored line. So all the way blanket stitch, back stitch here, blanket stitch, back stitch to here, and then we'll do some details with ribbon B. Okay, so one of the fun things you can do with ribbon, and this can be done with any ribbon, it doesn't have to be, you know, the silk kind for embroidery only, because we're just going to be weaving it in these ladders. So what you want to do is come up from the back into the very base. Right here. And then trying to keep this as flat as possible. We're just going to weave this in and out. And the best way to do that is just put this on a flat surface and just go one stitch at a time. So use the back of the needle so you don't split anything, because really we're just wanting to go right underneath this one stitch. And I just do one at a time so that I can make sure, you know, that when I pull this through, it's going to lay flat. So it's a little time consuming, super easy, but really time consuming. So just kind of pull on that, and that way you can make sure that that lays flat. Because even if you make sure that the ribbon is flat as you're sewing through, it's still going to want to twist up on you. That's just the nature of the ribbon. Alright, so just take the back of your needle, go underneath the blanket stitch strand, and just before you pull it all the way through, make sure that it's flat. And you can go all the way up to here, and then once you get to a place where there's no more ladders, we're just going to bury the ribbon and then come back up, and I'll show you what that looks like when we get there. Okay, so again, you're just over this stitch, and you could go under all of them if you want to. If you want to see all of those lines, you can certainly do that. I've just chosen to go into every other, But there would be nothing wrong if you wanted to see every one of your blanket stitch lines you've worked so hard to put in there. Okay, yeah, see that this guy wants to just curl right up. But if we have it flat in our hand like this, then pull the ribbon through. The only place you really need to worry about it being flat is in between the two spokes that you're working on. And then because there's no stitches here, just kind of bury it and pull it so it's straight. And the nice thing about that too is that sort of locks it in place, locks everything that you've done in place here. And then just continue up, weaving that in, and then we're gonna bury it in here and come out this point and do some just ribbon stitch. All right, so once you reach the end here, just travel in the batting, come out at the point, and then we could just do a couple ribbon stitches here, you know. And if you're working with the kind that you can't pierce the ribbon, you know, it's not 100% silk for embroidery, that's okay. Then just do a straight stitch, you know, you don't have to pierce the ribbon in on itself. But if you have that silk, then you can go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to work three little flowers, almost just like it's a little plant spray. And maybe these are a little shorter. And then just come right back out this side here and work your way back down to the bottom. Just weaving in and out, burying it right here to lock everything in place, and then just doing exactly what you did on the other side. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it's done. So it's a nice way to showcase the ribbon that you have, whether it's solid or multicolor silk or poly or whatever. It's just a really nice way to show off some nice ribbon that you might have. So now what I want to do is add a little bit more texture without going so much over the top on details. So I'm going to just take a different color of the thread that I used for the background, and of course you could just use your same background color, which would be fine. This is the 12 weight by Sulky. I love this for hand quilting, for big stitch quilting. And so I just wanted to get a little bit more of the seafoam green here in the corner. So for me, I'm just choosing a different color. But again, you do whatever you want to do. If you like your background color and you want to match it, then what we're going to do is just sort of echo quilt a little bit. So I'm going to work a quilting line up the side of the ribbon to here and on both sides. And then I want to work an echo quilting that surrounds here and comes all the way up to the tip. So I'm going to go ahead and work that, and then I'll show you what that looks like. But to start it, I'll probably just start right here. It doesn't really matter where you start. Start right here on the inner line. And then again, we're just going for that 4 stitches to the inch. So you think 1/8 inch. 1/8 inch, and you're just echoing that line about 1/8 of an inch away, just to give yourself a little bit more texture. It's kind of nice. If you're enjoying that negative space, of course you could omit this part. This is really just decorative. If you want something more in here, you could use size 8 pearl cotton would be beautiful. So whatever you have that that you think might go, use it. You know, more is more on these. I think we talked about that on Facebook. More is more. So whatever you want to do. Okay, so as you can see, I did that seafoam green quilting thread on the outside all the way up to the tip, a little bit on the inside, and then on the outside of this piece. And it's hard to see on camera, but it kind of puffs up this ribbon, which is really pretty. So just a few more things. Looking at this, I feel like there just needs to be something here and maybe something in here. And then I'm going to call it good for now. You know, we can always go back and add stuff later to the corner once we get our sides on and see what materials we have left. But let's see. For right now, what I want to do is my famous little Lazy Daisy flower right here. So I'm just going to work a 4-stitch Lazy Daisy blossom with a bead at the top of each one. So I'm just going to come to that inner part, my original stitching line, make a tall Lazy Daisy kind of pointing up, put on a bead, and this is bead F, by the way, if you're looking at your list or if you've got a kit, and then come back down to where you originally went in, just below it is fine, and then work another guy right next to him, maybe a little bit shorter. Pop a bead on. Come up in that little V there, and then work a third one, a little shorter, kind of facing down below. We're sort of just making a little fan. Put a bead on, and then of course you're always working over that. I know we've done a million Lazy Daisies, so I know you know this. Working over that bump, and then come right back up. Try not to pierce your applique or disturb your blanket stitch there. And we'll do one more little guy pointing down. Almost looks like a butterfly wing, doesn't it? Alright, knot it on the back. And do the same thing on the other side, and then one more little thing to do, and we'll call it good. It is amazing to me how that little tiny detail just adds so much, doesn't it? And you know, don't be afraid if you love that and you want to come out further and do some things, you know, that sort of mimic this line, please do. I mean, I think you guys are getting into it. I mean, the things that people have been coming up with are amazing. So I'm just so excited, and I'm learning so much from all of you. So this is just so great. So the last thing I want to do in this guy is kind of halfway up and sort of working behind this fairy wing. I want to do some of those little pistol stitches. And if you remember, that's the French knot on the extended piece of thread. And to me that just looks like celebration. I just love that. So again, this is just, you can hold the thread, you know, towards you, away from you, however is comfortable. Just make sure you're wrapping 1, 2, 3, let's do 4 this time. By the way, this is embroidery floss E. The same thread that I used to make our stem stitch down here. Okay, and then if you remember, you want to hold your thread in a French knot. This is sort of the secret. Hold your thread and tighten that up. Let's make a longer one right next to it. And I think I'm not sure if I said, but here I just did the same little piece of thread that I did the Oya in, but of course whatever color you want there, you're free to use whatever you want to. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then before you insert your needle, make sure you're bringing your yarn under the needle. And then let's go even longer. Let's go right here. Hold your thread in place and pull. And then right here we'll do a little short guy. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then pop that in place. All right, and once you repeat all of those things that we learned today on all 4 corners, your mandala will start to look really filled in. Next week, we're gonna go ahead and start the sides and put our little lotus flowers on all 4 sides and then embellish them the week after. And then the last week, we're gonna talk about some options that you might have to finish off your piece. And also, I want to let you know how I came up with this design. I mentioned that it is from a drawing of an iPad program that I have, and so I will give you details on how I worked to make this design so that you might make your own. So I want to thank you so much for joining me on this project. I know stitch along is so much fun, and making a project is way more fun with friends, new and old. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your work, and I appreciate seeing all the ideas and innovation and skills that you all have. And I just can't wait to see all the finished mandalas all together in that art show on the website. It's going to be really great. So keep working, keep posting pictures. I'm here if you have any questions at all. Let us know what ideas you have, and we will see you next week. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.